and she's going to be talking about her experiences in World War II. She and I met yesterday for tea and cookies, which were delicious. And we talked this all over, and we decided the best way to go is for me to give you a little background information about what led to World War II and some of the things that were going on at that time. And then we'll toss it over to her, and she can give you her story of how things went. So, thought we'd start today, and I knew Erane would love this political cartoon. Thought we'd start today with a little picture of Hitler and Stalin. I'm not sure if you can read it way back in the back, but it says, Hitler is saying, the scum of the earth, I believe, welcoming Stalin. And then Stalin says back, the bloody assassin of the workers, I presume. So Hitler and Stalin, there was some collaboration there during the beginning of World War II, and we'll be dealing with some of that today. So just to start us off, World War II was not an out-of-the-blue event. There were a lot of things that built to the war happening. So what I did is I put together just a brief timeline of some of the events that were unfolding starting in the 1930s that brought us to the place we were in September of 1939. So Japan invades Manchuria, the Spanish Republicans overthrow their monarchy, Hitler comes to power in 1933, that obviously was a big one. The Nuremberg laws were enacted against Jews. Italy invades Ethiopia. The purges and show trials start in Russia. In addition to that, Hitler remilitarizes the Rhineland, which was very much against the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I. So you can start to see the tensions building and this sense that something's going to have to happen. The Spanish Civil War begins. Japan attacks China. Germany annexes Austria. And the European leaders meet in Munich to try to negotiate with Hitler. You have to remember, after World War I, there was no interest in ever having another war again. World War I was called the Great War, and the idea was that it was horrible. The death toll was so much more than had ever been expected in a war. It was the first war that used mustard gas and machine guns and tanks, so the death toll was pretty dramatic. And if you can imagine the difference between using a rifle or a gun that you have to load each time versus a machine gun, you can just imagine what that did to the death toll. The death toll in just one battle in World War I was equivalent to the entire number of casualties in the Civil War. So huge numbers. 1939, and that's where our story begins. In 1939, Germany invades Czechoslovakia. The Spanish Civil War ends. There's a Nazi-Soviet pact that we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Germany invades Poland. Britain and France declare war on Germany, and World War II has officially begun. So the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact is a really important point to understand when Erane starts in with her story. So on August 23rd of 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed a pact agreeing that neither side would attack the other. Hitler wanted this because he would avoid a two-front war, which is really what did him in during World War I. So he was concerned about having France and Britain on one side and having Russia on the other and being able to fight that war in both places at the same time. So for him, this non-aggression pact was a win. And for Stalin, it was a win because the numbers of people and the resources in Russia were really not in a position to support war. The purges in Russia in the 1930s killed about 4 million people, and a lot of the people in Russia were starving to death. They were not in a position to fight a war. Also, Russia had not been investing in armaments or any of the other things that we need in order to fight a war. So for Stalin, this was doing what myself and many of our students are doing at this moment, which is really procrastinating and pushing something off that he knew he probably would have to deal with eventually, but even buying himself some more time, he knew would help his cause to be more successful in the war. So Hitler and Stalin, for their own reasons, signed this non-aggression pact. One element of the pact that was not known at the time was that it called for dividing Poland up. So Russia and Germany divided Poland up. In addition, they've divided several other countries in the area. It's important to know too, obviously Russia fought on the side of the Allies during World War II, but this non-aggression pact, you can imagine, did not make the other Allied countries very happy. They felt a little sold out by Stalin and the Soviet Union, so things didn't start off on a very good note there. This is a New York Times headline showing us what was said when Germany attacked. And then moving forward, the Curzon line shows you exactly where the Nazis and the Soviets had their turf, so to speak. And that line was very well defined. And moving forward, this is a picture I stole from Marine's book. Thank you. It's a good picture. This picture shows you exactly what happened. You see Germany invading on the 1st of September 1939, and then the Soviets invade on the 17th of September 1939, and just right up to the middle. There were some who thought that the Soviets would go a little further and fight the Germans, but obviously that didn't happen for the reasons that we now know but didn't know at the time. So you can see right where the center is and how they progressed. A couple other things that I wanted to show you before we toss it over to Erane. I know she's the reason why you're here, but sometimes you have to listen to a lecture before you get to the good stuff. There was a massacre of Polish army officers and police officers and some high-ranking officials in Poland. It happened, or it was approved anyway, on March 5th, 1940. There were 22,000 men killed. And this picture, I tried to find a picture that was graphic enough but not too graphic. If you decide to go online, you can see some truly horrible pictures. I know it's lunchtime and I didn't want to do that to you. But in many cases, men were lined up right by a big ditch that had been dug with a bulldozer and just shot one after another so they could fall right into this pit. There were 8,000 Polish officers, 6,000 police officers, and a variety of other people that the Soviets deemed to be a concern. All of those people were assassinated. During the war, it was blamed on the Nazis, and with what we know about the Nazis, I guess we could, yeah, okay, maybe it was them. So they were blamed for this. Russia continues to this day to deny that they had any part in it, but there is plenty of evidence at this point to indicate that it was the Russians who did this. On this next slide, I've got a map that shows you, some of the locations where bodies were buried, where mass graves are located. Many of the sites have been excavated. They're still finding more. Even today, they're still digging some of that up and finding more spots. I'm almost ready to turn it over to Erane, but I do want to say, we worked pretty hard to find some photos, but none of them are Erane's pictures, and none of them have her in there. We talked about it yesterday. She was laughing about the idea that she would be in one of these camps with a camera taking pictures. Obviously not going to happen, so I want to make that disclaimer. We tried to find some pictures that were similar enough to give you a sense of what was going on, but again, they are not officially Erane's pictures. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Erane. Our plan is that we will talk until, she will talk. I will be quiet, I promise. But we'll talk until about 12:30 or so, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you may have. And Erane said she's willing to answer pretty much everything, right? Yep, she'll answer any question you have about anything. So we'll toss it over to Erane.
Okay. I don't know whether I would still have to give more little background of my family.
Why don't you give your background?
Like
right. I talked about big history.
Happened. Yeah,
you do
right,
little
right.
history.
Yes, no, I was born in Switzerland. Can you hear? Oh, no? Now? Better? Okay. Yes, I had a Polish father, 100% Polish father, and 100% mother that was Swiss. He was working to represent Poland in all the consulates that Poland had in Europe. In every little country there was a little Polish consulate, that they used young people who just started their job. And he was like an attaché, which was a beginning of his job, what he did. He facilitated passports or visiting papers to people who wanted to go and travel. And then, of course, that was his job. And he worked in every little country that had a consulate, Polish consulate. I was born at the time when they were in Switzerland, in Basel. So that was where I was born. So I was registered as a Swiss citizen, because that's what happens in not all countries, but some. Now, United States also, you're born here, you are U.S. citizen. So that's how it happened in Switzerland too. And then, of course, we traveled all over, and the last 2 years we spent again in Switzerland. He was again called back, and he was going to be promoted in his job and stuff, so it was a nice little step for us, for us and for my parents. And we, of course, heard about the funny rumors about the political situation in Europe that wasn't very safe anymore. This was 1939. And of course, when school was out, and I came home with my straight A grades, which I had to bring to be able to go and spend 1 month in Poland on my father's uncle's Arabian horse farm. And I just loved that. That was my thing I dreamt of the whole year. So my straight A papers in my hand, I ran home on October, not August, before, when our schools let out. And of course I was running in there just saying, looky here, now I'm going. Did you make arrangements for my trip to go to see Uncle Anton? He was the one who then owned the Arabian horse farm. So they said, well, wait a minute. This is a pretty bad year to even do any traveling, because we don't even know whether we will have a war coming up or not. Hitler is really coming to all kinds of different places. He is occupying stuff, and we, of course, by then, you know how we were when I was 14 years old in 1939. I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have, television. We didn't have any really stuff that we could hear the news properly. The government was a little shaky in Poland because they didn't know what was going to happen finally. So you couldn't get papers, you couldn't get actually any true information. The mayors of towns would normally get on a loudspeaker and they would say, now, we hear that the Germans are putting up together a whole line of tanks and of armory and everybody on the entire Polish border that Germany and they bordered, which was the whole western border in Poland. And so then my mother said, I just don't feel well sending you there to Poland now, because something is going to happen, and then what will you do when you will be alone? And my father agreed with her, but I was having a crying fit one after another because I wanted to go. I was 14 only, and I just didn't want to miss that. It was just my dream. And here they were cutting me off. She says, I brought my part of my agreement, but you are not keeping yours, so that's not very nice. So then my mother finally said, well, maybe if I go with you and stay there the month. That was furthest from her wanting to spend a vacation there. She was a city girl, and she would have loved to have gone and spent some time on the shores in Italy, to have a very good vacation like I was going to have there and everything. But my father said to her, well, if you want to really sacrifice a whole month like that of your time, because living on a horse farm was not a good idea for my mother to spend a month. But she decided, well, she said, because if anything happens, what is she going to do? She is a young kid. What is she going to do when Germany attacks or something happens? With me there, I might help because I could make reservations ahead of time and everything. So maybe the week. So then they decided I could go. So we left just in August, like I normally did. And of course, both my mother and I traveled there, and I spent my month on the horse farm, and I enjoyed that. I write about it in my book, what I learned and what we did and how much riding I got in and how many lessons I got. So that was my dream. So then, of course, Germany comes in, their tanks roll in. So the war is on. They never said that they were declared the war, because normally countries might say, we are going to attack at such a date, but they never did. They just came in, rolled in. And then, of course, all the people who tried to tell the news to the people who were invaded we were all almost on the western border. Uncle Anton's farm was close to the western border, so we would have been invaded immediately. So then the order was, the mayor of the little town that was close to us announced on the microphone to everybody, and of course everybody repeated that. There were no new newspapers out anymore because everything was stopped. The government, Polish government, emptied the treasury of all the money that they had there and ran off with it to England to establish a Polish government in exile, and established it there. So of course you can imagine how the people felt about it. They were just beside themselves. How can a government leave a country at this time now and just go somewhere else and take the money with them? So of course people were just terribly upset over that. And everybody was screaming and cussing them, and it was just awful. But then, when you look at it this way, when the Germans came in, who would have robbed the money out of the treasury? They wouldn't have left it there. They would have taken it. That would have been the first thing that they would empty. Would be the treasure. And Poland had a lot of saved money. They were Polish people are very good workers. They are good planners, and they are good family people and good farmers. So they were like a breadbasket of the whole European place, because they could supply. They would grow enough of food and to supply to everybody. So this is why everybody was just saying, my God, what are we going to do now? Well, as the country was divided, apparently Hitler and Stalin used a man by the name of Curzon, right? And he said he was going to divide Poland in a certain way so that like Warsaw, which was the main city, would go to Germany, and everybody else would get some other thing. So there is a line they call the Curzon line, and I show it in my first book. I made a copy of it, and I did it because in the newspaper you get all the Polish towns named in Polish, and you probably wouldn't know what they were. So I put them all in English, so that people, when they say not Warszawa, I say Warsaw, because that's what everybody used in Europe. So I thought that would help. And I also gave the position of Poland, that it was surrounded south by the Carpathian Mountains and Czechoslovakia, and then Hungary and Romania, and then down there, Russia all the way on the eastern part, and around there, other small countries that were smaller countries, but they bordered Poland up there also. And then we had a little window to the Baltic Sea. Poland did, a very small one, right there in Gdynia and in Sopot. So they could have an access and export food that they grew and stuff by the sea, which was very important to them because that's where the money came in, because they were selling. You can go now to a grocery store and you still can buy Krakus ham, don't you? Have you ever tried that? Krakus ham, that was made in Poland already then. See, that's how well they were known and how good they were in raising animals.
Can you tell us about the train?
Which
Your train, the train you were on.
Yeah. Well, then of course we heard this announcement, move women and children out of the western part, go east as far as you can go. So we did. My mother packed me up and took everything that we needed, and just we went on a train and we started traveling, and we got as far as Warsaw, and there we were bombed, because by then the Germans already attacked, and this must have been like the day before the September 1st or September 1st, and we were bombed, and of course the person who was doing the train came out and said, we're not going anywhere, it's all damaged and everything, so just get out, get your stuff, and move out, and walk out if you can, because there is no other way that we can move you anymore. So that's what we did. We started walking, and that was our 1 week and 1 month after another of long, long walks, dragging our supplies and everything for a long time. And then, of course, it was hard to even do the walking because there were hundreds of thousands of people on those roads that were just going away from the German attack, to escape that and then to go into the part that Russia occupied. Germany attacked on September 1st, Russia attacked on September 17th. So there wasn't much leeway there in between. So anyway, we were going and we were over into the Russian occupied part, and we kept walking, dragging our stuff that we packed up and that we thought would be necessary to have. My mother had all her money in her big purse because she saved that for the back trip to go back to Switzerland. You know, she saved enough zlotys because Switzerland had marks as money. And then, and she's changed the zlotys, which were Polish money, the marks into zlotys, so she had a whole bag full, this fat of it, because that would pay for the train trip to the station, to the plane station, and then the plane ride too. So she had plenty of that. And one day we were sitting there just resting. We could not walk anymore. My mother featured something for me to carry, like a rucksack, like a back carrying thing, you know, and I couldn't walk anymore. It was heavy, and she was dragging stuff, pulling the things that she thought we were going to need. So she couldn't drop it anywhere, so that's what we were doing. And a man, we sat and leaned against the car there, and a man drove up in a truck and said to us, "Is this your car?" And my mother said, "No, it isn't. We are just, I don't know whose car it is, we are just resting here, sitting for a while." And he says, "Do you know if there is any gas in it, in the car?" And of course, I was a car specialist. I knew from my father already, who was driving tiny little sports car for years before that. So, and I drove when I was 11 years old. I could drive in Switzerland on the streets because there was no driver's license for, to have then. And of course, there was no speed limits on the streets. It was a different world, believe me, completely. So then I just said, my mother said, well, he says, I'm so tired, but if we find some gas. And we looked, and I said, well, I know how to siphon out of the car. If you want me to help, we can do that. So he said, oh, really? How do you know? I said, too long story. I can't tell you now. But let's just get the pipe that you have, that you stick in there, and we'll see whether there is any. Well, sure enough, there was gas in there, apparently, but they must have been strafed by the planes that were flying there, and the engine must have been shot up because there was still gas there. So then I have...
About the planes.
Huh?
Tell them a little bit more about the planes that would fly by.
Yeah, those were, you see, the Germans also saw the big exit of all the Polish people from West Poland going east. And they decided, hey, that's easy target. They're all on the roads, they're all in the fields. So they would fly like 6 or 8 of low flying planes. We didn't have any arms to shoot at them or anybody was there. The Polish army was defunct. We didn't have anybody there anymore fighting, So then they just flew over, and whatever moved on the ground they shot with the machine guns. It was just unbelievable. Now then, when we picked up the gas and put it on the truck, my mother said to the man, okay, you've got the wheels. I have money for the gas. If you would want to take us, drive us wherever we are going east. Obviously, we don't know where, but we are just going because we were told. And he says, well, I'm doing the same thing. He was going to, his dream was to go to Puszcza Białowieska, which was a very famous Polish jungle that would invite a lot of hunters from all over Europe and all over the world to hunt there because they bred animals that were not known in other countries. So anyway, that's where he was going. We didn't care where we were going. We were going east. So he said, okay.
So I just want to make sure we've got time for the really important
Right.
part. So she went into hiding for a little bit in the Polish countryside, and then you got caught by the Russians.
That's right.
So
Then, of course, on the 17th, the Russians came in. And it wasn't obvious immediately what their plan was, what they were doing. But then, you know how rumors start for people who don't have any other communication. I mean, now you would have a cell phone, you could find out what was happening, the whole world would know. But nobody knew. So then they would finally, the rumors said, they are exporting people out of the eastern part of Poland and taking them somewhere. Into Russia, apparently. They didn't know where. Nobody was telling them where they were going. So then finally, we settled in a little farmhouse. That was a person who left that farm, and we just moved in. There was nobody in there, and it was like a public office of somebody, So we said, can't we live here for a while? I mean, we've been walking all this time and then driving in this truck, And I drove to relieve the driver because then he would be glad. He says, oh, I can take a nap now, And once he decided that I could drive the truck. So he did. And then we stayed there at the farm. And by then, of course, the Polish government was gone. All the jails were opened. There was nobody governing the country anymore. So all the people that left jails and they went roaming around, robbing people and everything. And one night we were sitting there and we decided we would not sleep at night in the building, in the house. because that would be the first thing whoever came, you know, because we had these rumors that people were robbing everybody around. So we would sleep in the barn. We took our blankets and our pillow and everything, and we would sleep on the hay on top in the barn. And one night, a car we heard that was stuck in the road. I could tell right away, you could hear that they were trying to get the wheels out of the mud, you know, but they couldn't, and they would repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So finally, two men got out of the car and walked over towards the thing, probably looking for shovels to, you know, to help dig out the tires out of the road. So we were just very quietly sitting there, and the man who was with us, the driver, Dupchik was his name, Bob Dupchik, George Dupchik actually, and he found a gun there because those people who abandoned that farm that we moved into had guns all over hidden, you know. They were like associated with the office of the woods that somebody managed when, you know, we didn't know who they were, but we thought so. So then he climbed on top of the big door on a little thing that you could stand on with a gun in his hand, and he waited for them to come. And then all of a sudden the door slid open a little bit, and the people were just yelling, screaming how nasty the guy who was in that house, who lived there in that house. He was a forester. Then we found out, we didn't know who he was, but he was a forester, and he apparently put them in jail for doing something that they were not supposed to do. So they were really after him. He was gone, and we were there. Of course, we were in the barn, so they didn't know that we were sitting up there quietly. And I remember the driver kept saying to us, cover the children's mouth. I mean, don't make them make any noise. They can't hear us. And he was standing there with the gun. And then when they were really screaming and yelling and calling this forester all kinds of dirty names and everything, the driver, I think, had enough. So he lowered his gun and he shot and killed both of those guys right there under the door. So then we had another problem. I mean, my mother kept saying, there are wheels there. But he says, there are two dead people down on the ground, you know, and I shot them. I've got to know, they looked like they had Polish army uniforms on. So I don't know how I would feel. So then he finally went down. I mean, I'm going into too many details here.
Maybe, because I know they want to hear the rest too.
Yeah, I know. So you know, it's just all in the book. So when I get caught into something, I just keep going. I'm glad I asked you to interrupt and say what happened next.
Well, so let's get to the part where the Soviets capture you and bring you to the
Oh,
train.
okay, right, yes. So then he shot the two men. My mother helped him to drag the bodies into an abandoned well in the back there and toss them in there and everything. So, and she wasn't happy about that, but then she was a city lady, listen. She didn't want to do things like that, but anyway, she did it. So then we went back home and we looked, we said, it was black at night, there were no, she said, tomorrow we'll check the car. And I said, I want to see it too, right away, because I was, you know, interested, because we could probably drive it. So then we went and we did it.
And you found the jewelry that you split up,
yeah, we
right?
found all
And
kinds
then,
of things that these people robbed, all these people that when they were released from jail. So my mother found this huge carton, this tall and this big, of jewelry that was just loose stuff that as they robbed them by boxes or something, they just tossed it in there. And so then my mother right away knew after we would leave, when the car would be pulled out of there, we would leave, then she would divide that with the driver and between her and the driver, and that's exactly what we did.
So then the Soviets came in the middle
Then
of the
the
night.
Soviets came in the middle of the night on the 17th, and then of course the rumors started circulating that they were arresting people for some reason and taking them away. We didn't know why.
Right, but then they came for you.
Then, we lived in a little abandoned house
Right.
that the people were taken apparently during Christmas, arrested and taken, and we moved in there because it was abandoned. I write about that too in a more detailed story, But then we were, at night they came one day because my mother said, in the meantime the driver went.
He left, right.
He left. He said he wasn't going to wait for the Russians to come and get him. Please come with us, he kept saying to my mother. My mother said, there is a snowstorm coming. How are you going to use the road? The roads in Poland were terrible. They were all muddy and all, They didn't build roads like we build them here. So, my mother said, I can't leave. We have a roof over our heads here. We have enough wood put away that we can keep alive. And he says, no.
So the Russians captured you. And
Well,
brought
they
you
came
to-
and captured us and said, we are taking you to a safe place. We are taking you safe from the Germans. You know what would happen to you if the Germans would get you? We are taking you somewhere where you would be safe from them. And my mother said, well, that sounds okay. So we packed up, and at night we went on a lorry that already had people sitting on it that they already picked up from other houses, And we got in there, took our things that we thought we would use again, our own pillows, and our this and that, and then we went to the train. And of course, if you remember the stories about the gulags in Russia that they did years ago, many years ago, that's how they used to, they didn't believe in jails. They didn't want to take care of people in jails. They wanted them to work for the food they gave them. So when we got on this train, they fed us on the trip. And the trip lasted probably 6 or 8 weeks because Russia had one railroad thing going all the way north and to other places. But we were chosen, our place was chosen, was Siberia. Everybody else went either to the farms that were government government.
I have a picture. I'll get it.
Government farms and stuff. So so they just put us on this big train. And when my mother said, "Oh, those are cattle trains," that's what they were. They looked like. We have a picture of
Yes,
those.
I'll pull it
of
up.
those trains. There were people came. Those armed guards, Russian guards said, "Okay, we allow 40 per cart per day of a thing. 40 have to go in, and that's how we're going to travel." So apparently. We were assigned, 40 of us assigned, and we were lucky to find some very nice, good people to be with. That 40 was just, thing that saved us because there was a doctor in between the group, there was a professor from a Polish university, a member of that group with a wife and 2 little children. There were several people. There was a woman who was also a head of a good, high-graded, classes school in Poland. So they were all intelligent people.
So now you're in Russia. You're in
Now
Siberia.
we are traveling on the train, and we are going. It's forever. So the teacher from Warsaw insists we learn Russian because it says they are going to talk to you. I want you to understand them and I want you to speak to them. So that's what they did. We were there forever. and they would bring little little meal on spots that had like a kitchen. We finally arrived about 100 kilometers from the place where we came to. You want to tell me about this gift, why this man helped us so much or not? Well, that they can read
They
it.
can buy the book.
They
if they
can
want to
read,
know.
they can read it, yes, because that takes too much time apparently. So anyway, we finally were unloaded. We had to take a barge on a river for a while, and then finally we get to a point where it was like, well, maybe 20 or 30 kilometers to walk. And we had to then all walk to the camp. And as we finally arrived to it, a lot of people fell off because they could not, there were older people, they couldn't make the trek. So they kept saying, oh, let them lay there. The next group where that will come will pick them up, so they'll be fine. So we didn't pay attention to them. And then finally when we arrived there, we came to a big fenced-in camp. And this one of the people who was leading us there said to us, this is where you are going. This is your gulag, your hard labor camp that you are going to be stationed. And there was a big sign above the gate that we came up to, and it said, "Kto nie robotajet, tot nie kushajet," which meant the person who doesn't work does not eat. And that was our greeting there. You had to work the amount that they made you work and told you that at your age you had to put in so many hours and you had to produce so much work, or else you were not getting any food. So that's what we did. Yes.
Not too much. What, they said, when the Russians captured you, they said that it was better that they took you than the Germans, because you know what the Germans are going to do.
That's right.
Did you know what the Germans were going to do?
Well, we knew what was happening as they came into that part of Poland. They were bombing the stations, they were killing people.
I think you're asking about the concentration camps, Nat?
Or those?
Well, I
No.
know they had some concentration camps, but they didn't have what.
Oh no, we didn't. Who had the news about things like that then? We didn't know anything about it. I read that later on in papers. This is how I found out what happened there. But that was about it.
So tell us how life was in the camp. What was it that you had
Well,
to do?
in the camp, first of all, we were in you saw the barracks there. There
I'll
was a
pull them up.
picture.
Yes.
There was a picture of the barracks were like a line of wooden barracks that were all open. There were no doors in between. So we had to like separate them with blankets or sheets or something to put a family or one person or two people who were there together in a little section, and we could just put a little blanket over thing and roll it shut or open or whatever. And then there was one door at the end of the cabin, of the section, and one at the front. So we would kind of have to use the two doors on each of the thing. Those are there now, right? Okay, so we of course moved in, and the cleaning was, we had to clean out everything, and then finally they gave us like maybe 5 days or something, and they said that one of the men there said, well, what are we sleeping on? On the dirt here? You know, they were all upset over that, and they said, no, your beds are all stacked up there. There were wooden frames with a rope, you know, held together for a mattress. And they said, tomorrow we'll disinfect them. You know, the big tank over there, we stick in the boiling water, we stick like half of the bed and then another half, or put them like by halves, as many as we can put in there in boiling water, so we get all the bugs out of those out of those beds, which we thought that was nice, really, you know. But then they did it, and they said, we have a weekend to do it in, and you can sleep whatever you want to do, floor or whatever you want to do. You can go outside if you want to sleep in the snow. So they were really not care. They didn't care. They had done that for years, those guards, you know. It was just their job. Pick up the people, deliver them. That was it. So anyway, we got cleaned up. We got the little places cleaned up a little bit. The next day, we did whatever. And then we were told to walk to our working place. And it was in the Siberian thing, snow up to our knees. And we walked over into this woodsy part. And then every guard to each group would come in, and he would say, now you are how old are you? And I said 14. Well, you have to work the same amount as a grown-up, because that's your age. So then, and I said, well, what is the work? And she says, you and your mother, who is obviously old enough to work, they said, and you have to put up 5, each of you, 1 meter square of trees that you have to cut over and cut them 1 meter long, and then stack the 1 meter long, up high 1 meter, wide 1 meter, and for a square meter, that's just like a square yard we have, you know. So for a square meter, you have to put them together, and each one of you has to put up 5 of these to get a ticket for a meal. And for the first 2 or 3 or 4 days, my mother, we couldn't do it. There was just no way that we could do that. You know, they gave us all hand machinery. There was nothing that was run by anything, by gas or anything like we have here. They gave us a huge saw that was about that big with a handle on each end, okay? And we tried to cut a tree with it, and the saw was bending and it just not working. And then somebody came over and said, you have to pull. One person on one side, and only the person that has it, you pull it one way, and then the other person pulls the other way. Otherwise, it won't cut, it won't work, because we tried to push it, and you know, we didn't know. So anyway, we finally learned that, and we started cutting a little bit better. But then my mother decided we will never put up 10 cubic meters a day to get something to eat. And of course, you starve them. And that's, my mother said, remember the sign? Person who doesn't work does not eat. So we won't get any tickets to go and pick up our food. And then what the food was, because we already cleaning our place there, we already had the meal. It was a bowl of kasha. I don't know whether you know what the kasha is, some grain that is cooked like oatmeal or any rice like we cook, you know, thick. So that was dry or thick, and they cooked it. So then they gave us a bowl of that, and then he took a little teaspoon and made like a little indentation in the middle of the kasha and put little oil in it. So that was the only oil we got. And we got one big slice of black bread that was soggy, this thick, and black. It was totally, you know, it wouldn't look like bread. But anyway, that's what we got, and we got as much water as we wanted to drink. He says, there is your tea in the samovar. And of course, tea in Russia is water. They don't have tea. They didn't have. There was no import of anything to that country from anywhere.
Tell them about the tooth powder.
Yes, we had a little store that the man stood behind the counter in a little white jacket. He was managing the store. You know what could buy in the store? Tooth powder. That was all that the shelves were filled with. Tooth powder. That was all. You couldn't buy anything. They just didn't have anything. So we finally found that out. Listen, that was a big discovery, everything. He said, how does a country live like this? We couldn't imagine. So anyway, so my mother finally decided she's got to figure something out. So she watched the guy that marks, every time this guard came and with a red crayon-like thing, marked a little mark on the 1 square meter set there, and then he said, oh my God, you only have 6 or 7 for the 2 of you, and you have to have 10. So then my mother decided she would do something about it. And I didn't want to know because I was scared stiff that if she did something they wouldn't like or that was illegal in their opinion, that they would arrest her. What would I do? You know, I was only 14 years old and I was a kid. So she said, go walk over to the big, they always let us burn the pieces that were not used, the branches from the trees in a big pile to warm up at when we were working. So we could go and anybody else could warm up. So my mother would say, go over there, talk to the guard who's standing then next to the thing. Talk to him, interest him in whatever, make him listen to you, because I don't need them looking at me here. My mother, and I said, what are you going to do? And she says, never mind, I have a plan, just go. So I did. And I've been talking to him, I've been blabbing to him and just talking about anything that I thought he would like. And he would ask questions, you know, about this at home, how it was. And I mean, I just kept talking. And then finally my mother, I kept glancing over my mother's place there, what she was doing. Finally I saw her smiling. So I thought, oh, now we can go back. So I just said, I thanked the guy and I said goodbye and I walked over and my mother said, I think we are fine today. And then this guard came to check our work. And of course, he checked and he said, oh, today you really did well. My goodness, you have 1 over what you actually need. I'll give you 2 tickets for food. You were that good, really. So you know, so my mother said, well, thank you. Collected the tickets and we had food that night. Whatever food there was, you know. We had that. And that's how she did it later on with any guard that was changed, that was new or something. She always did the same thing. She always pointed the ones that were not marked, that were real close together, and you know, in a spot. She would say, oh, we did this, and that. So they marked those. But then the next day, the next evening when the guy came to check them, you know, she has already removed those little pieces. And I said, where are the little pieces that you cut off with the mark on it? Because she used the little hand saw, you know, and my mother said, I've got them. She says, you can't burn them here because people will see. She says, don't worry, they are behind my shirt in there, they're killing me, those pieces. So then that's how we came home and we burned them in our stove there, that the fire was always going, you know, for kids who didn't work, they were not old enough, so they were keeping the piechka is this little stove that kept us alive because we had to prepare our thing.
So explain how the jewelry that you got out of that box that the criminals had, how that paid off for you.
Yes, because then my mother found out that if you couldn't buy anything in those stores. One day my mother was mending something, sitting there mending something that I my clothes were torn or something. And a British wife of one of the guards who lived there to supervise us, came over and she says, "Oh, what are you doing? You are sewing." And my mother says, "Yeah, I'm mending this torn piece here." She says, "Where did you get the needle?" And my mother said, "What do you mean, where did I get the needle? I bought it a long time ago in Poland, you could." I said, my mother said, "Can't you buy them?" She says, "We can't get them anywhere. If we have a relative who belongs to the party somewhere in Moscow or in a big town somewhere that they have these available stores, they can maybe for a lot of money buy it, but otherwise we cannot buy it." And my mother right away put 2 and 2 together. She was a smart cookie. And she says to her, "Wait a minute, I have a couple of them." So she went to her sewing basket and he took out one needle and she said, "Here's another one." Oh, she says, "Oh my God, that's a good one. It's got a nice big opening there. I could put thicker thread in and everything." She says, my mother said, "How many potatoes?" Because we knew those people were growing potatoes of their own somewhere there in their thing. And my mother said, "How many potatoes would you give me for this one needle?" And the woman said, "Well, I don't know, 4, 5. My mother said, "No, I want more." So then she upped the number, and then my mother gave her the needle, and we got the potatoes. So then she started her own little shtick. She made soups, because the kasha, 2 portions of ours, you can put in there, if you added water and also heated the oil somewhere there, make it so that it would smell better, on the fire, pour it in there too, so you would have some taste there. 2 teaspoons from me and from her, from our portions. She would do that, and then when there was anything else that she could get for another needle from the woman, she would get that and add it. And she made this wonderful soup there, because she mixed it and cooked it all together, and it was edible then. It was really good. And you ate it with the piece of the dark bread, which you put on the little stove, and maybe like toasted it a little, cut it in pieces and toasted it so that it was edible too. So people who lived in our section there would come and they would say, "Can we have some?" They would come with a bowl always, because the soup was on the stove, a nice big pot, and she would always cook that. And we would share it with the other people. So that was how we lived then for a while.
Did people die?
A lot of people died, yes, because, see, we had a doctor in our group, and even though he put in his work that he had to put in to get food, he felt that all those sick people, he had to do something. So he decided he would go and make like house calls after work to see who needed help and how sick were they, because people didn't eat and they were dying of starvation because they couldn't put in the work. There were a lot of Jewish people in our area there too, who were the ascetic Jews, Orthodox Jews, who could not work. They just didn't understand how they worked for a living like this, Their religion was totally different. And this doctor said to us, he would like to go around, and he asked my mother, "Would you come with me and hand the light for me so that we could go?" My mother says, "No, I can't stand the sight of blood. I can't go with you." And my mother looked at me and I said, "Well, I'll go." So I was then the light carrier, and we went from one thing in another, and on 2 or 3 of those places, those barracks, he would say, this one is, we can't do anything about it. He's so malnourished that tomorrow he'll be dead. He knew that. And they all that. So then what we saw was trucks loading the bodies on each truck, and taking them away to bury somewhere. We didn't know. Nobody told us anything there, what was happening to them. And of course, the family, if they had any that stayed behind, they didn't know what happened. They just loaded the bodies and took them. And some people who were, he would say, who were so sick, but they could be saved if they could go to the hospital. Hospital's name was in Berezhnik. And that was like maybe 25 or 30 kilometers down that funny road that the truck drove, So, and you should, when you read it, you will know how they build these roads up there. They were all wooden roads, all off the ground and with boards this way so that they could ride them, wheels could go over them and everything, and then arrive there, get off, turn around and put it on and come back, because there was just one thing built there. So anyway, when did I finish?
Well, let's do this. Let's talk about the release.
Yes.
So, and then we'll open it up for questions. How's that? So
What
I'll tell them.
you mean?
I'll tell them what happened. So what ended up happening is Germany invaded the Soviet Union. And when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the Soviets
declared war in 1941.
Right, which was against the pact, of course, the Soviet
Yes.
Nazi pact. That was obviously against that. But when Germany came in, the Soviet Union needed help. And the other Allied forces said, well, we hear you.
I could maybe just say a few.
Okay.
Western Alliance.
Yes,
because
the Western Alliance.
The Western
Okay.
Alliance, which was United States, British, and some French still who were
Right.
free, and some other people. That was the Western Alliance that fought Germany.
Right.
So they asked the Western Alliance. Hitler said, I need help. Germans attacked me. They were not supposed to have. And I cannot fight them back. So I need help.
Right. So then
this committee said, we will give you help.
Yes.
But you have to release all the Polish people out of the camps, because the Polish people in the camps have men that are all military age. They can go and fight the Germans. And of course, that pleased Stalin, because he says, hey, that's bodies too, that's we can use.
Right. Now we
So,
need them.
Yeah, now we need them. Now we need everything. So,
Right.
And then, of course, they shipped into Iraq.
Right.
They
Well,
built an airport and they built a hospital there.
Right. What
Yeah.
they did, though, what the Soviet Union did, is they denied that the Polish citizens were actually in Siberia, in camps. They denied that they were ever there, but they did grant amnesty to the Polish prisoners, and,
That's right.
and they released them in order to get the help of the Western.
Of the
yeah.
Western thing, yes.
So, are you game for us to do some questions now?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So we've got a microphone in the back. I'll run down and grab it, and then if anyone has a question, just raise your hand, and we'll let Irene.
Yeah, well,
Does anyone have a question?
it's hard to repeat the written story, and put in as much as there is in there, and try to explain everything. It's hard. Okay.
Whatever happened to your mother?
What?
It was wanting to know what happened to your mother.
To my mother survived everything. She was the sturdiest person. Now on the front, I don't have a book here to show you because my books are somewhere. I don't know where they are.
So your mother came back to the...
My mother came back, yeah, because I then decided, my mother made me promise that this story should not be hidden, that it should be told to the world, because everybody now is talking about Germany's atrocities, But nobody knows what happened, that Russia was even involved in it, you know, because they kept it a secret. They didn't want anybody to know that they were having people in camps and you know, and have them dying and everything because they couldn't feed them properly. So anyway, that was it.
So we've got your next question.
Yes?
Was your mother and father reunited or no?
No, they never were. We found out later on because when my husband and I decided that he had to go out of Switzerland and go to the United States, we decided that we would go. But she was already by then in Switzerland too. We made some arrangements to get her over to a visitor's visa to family from Africa. She was in Africa still with the big Polish camp, because that's all you know they had there.
So
And there was
a question that my students asked that we talked about yesterday, but
Yes.
let's hear your answer. This is a good answer. Are you still angry about what happened to you in Russia?
very. I cannot get over it. I spoke fluently Russian, and I'm always trying to forget that. I just hate everything that this system did to that country. I mean, it was, unless you went there at the worst times and you actually witnessed it, you would not believe that you can run a country that way with nothing in it. No road building, no nothing. Because if you read history from before, maybe not European history, but we did. In my schools, I learned all of it, but maybe you didn't. But France once attacked Russia also. And what happened to them? They all died in Siberia because they were not used to this cold that hit them. The roads were so bad that the food supply that was delivered to them couldn't feed them. So they died of hunger there. The warm clothes for the winter didn't come because they couldn't transport them there. So the French people gave up. They lost hundreds of thousands of people in there. And they backed out.
When we talked yesterday, you shared some interesting things about the climate in Siberia, about the wind and
Yeah, well, the climate was 30, 40 below zero in the winter time. Now then spring came and you had sunshine, and actually the weather wasn't that bad. Siberia is huge place, big piece of the country. We were probably a little bit in the more southern part. It was still called Siberia, but there was planted with trees and bushes and everything, you know. So that was easier to live there and have to work to do there.
with the wind.
But then in the very, very cold winters, there was never any wind. Now, can you believe that? When my mother always used to say, my God is saving us. Because if this would be still windy on top of this cold, we wouldn't be able to survive it, and we would have frostbitten faces and everything, because we had to be outside then, you know. So she would say, that is really a good thing. 30, 40 below zero and no wind. You could hear a chirping bird a mile away from a tree there. That's how quiet it was. Very. So it was really amazing. But that was a lifesaver.
So, when did you come to the United States?
Yes.
Where did you go after you were released from the prison
from the camp?
Yeah.
We went to Basel, Switzerland. Well, not quite. From the camp, we went to Persia, crossing the Caspian Sea. We went to Persia and then lived there for a while. And this was where the money that Polish government took into England paid for us. See, we found out later. We didn't know that, but they paid for us that we could be on the roof, that we could be fed, that we could be clothed. We got a shipment of clothing from America in Persia, in Tehran. So this big Red Cross company that was running that part, International Red Cross, went over and picked up this huge supply of these clothes that were sent to us. And I remember every one of us picked something very nice. I have a picture of me. I picked up this beautiful blue coat that has a little fur hatting and two little fur stripes like this on there. My mother picked up a jacket, a knitted jacket, you know, like somebody knitted a sweater or something, and then we bought, and then of course this little boy that I still am in touch with, he is the one that is still alive from the people in the Russian camps. He is George Lossos, and he lives in Canada, and he was 3 years old when I met him in Tehran, in Persia, when we were all brought down there, you know, and now he's in his 70s, so he's still there, and we kept in touch all this time, from then on till now.
We have another question.
Yes.
Have you ever revisited that place, or have you just tried to forget it?
Visited what?
Visited Siberia.
No.
What did you tell me yesterday about going back to Russia? You said something about even if someone paid you. You said if someone paid you, you still wouldn't go back.
No. I wouldn't. It's in that part of life you try to shut it out and sort of eliminate. I wrote it. This is permanent because it's stuff on a page. It's written, okay? So that's permanent. So you did what your mother told you to do. She said that has to be publicized because people are publicized now. That was after we already saw each other, after we came home already. She kept saying, you haven't started yet. I can do it, my English isn't as good. I can do it, you should, because you went to an English university in India. So you know, and you can do it, and I would not allow you not to just to forget that. You've got to do it. So I did.
Another question.
Yes.
I'm wondering, how many different nationalities were you kept prisoner by?
Was it just the Russians, or were there any
Who?
other?
What nationalities? What you mean?
Besides the Russians, were
You mean the guards and the prisoners? All Russian.
not Polish or Jewish?
No, heavens, no, all Russian, no.
Did they treat Jewish people any differently from Christians
They
in
just
the camps?
treated them exactly the same as they treated us. They didn't care. You didn't work, you didn't eat, and if you didn't eat, you died. I mean, this was their attitude, really. They did not care. So,
Nana just asked me, were you ever held in a death camp? And
what I never did what?
held in a death camp. The concentration camps initially were really more work camps, concentration camps in Germany.
Yeah,
the Soviet one continued to be
Also,
a camp where
they
you
were-
worked,
they
but
were-
the focus wasn't killing people like
No,
some of the concentration
no,
camps by the end.
No, there was never an intent to actually eliminate people, like kill them. There was never an intent, they never did that. But people died of causes that they were not used to, lives like tree one day fell, and it fell in the wrong direction that it was supposed to be cut in and put down, okay? And it was a tree about this big, you know? So it fell because somebody miscalculated that it was going to maybe this way, because there was never any wind, so we didn't know where it was going to go. You had to really figure it out. And there were some people who knew. But then on this case, it fell over and it killed four people there, 4 Polish people that worked there. I tried to stay away from blood and gore. My book says it killed, that they were dead, and I thought that was enough. The fact was that one man, a branch hit him in such a way that it chopped off his head, and the head flew away and somebody caught it. I mean, that's, I didn't want to even mention that, because that was blood and gore. Why? He was dead, and that was it.
We've got another question.
Yes.
How long were you in Siberia totally?
2 years, a little bit over 2 years. 2 winters, which that's how I counted it. 2 winters. Because the summers and the spring, and then there were berries that we could mushrooms. They had wonderful edible mushrooms that people who knew which ones were poisonous and which ones weren't would point them right away to us, and we would go. And my mother's soup then became something, because not the ones that she just picked and cooked. She dried them too. She strung them on a little string and hung them over the pieczka, over the little thing overnight, and she would have a bunch of dried mushrooms when they were nicely sliced, and everything. And that, her soup became much better that way, because mushrooms add a lot of taste to it, see? So that's what we were happy to get into spring, because then we got berries. They grew wild all over also.
We have time for one more question, if there is one.
Yes?
Oh, Nicholas, for 300.
Have you ever visited your old home in Poland or in Switzerland?
No, it was no longer there. It was when they came in and they stole all the Germans. They stole all the Arabian horses and took them away, because that was something to steal, And so they took them all away, and of course the Uncle Anton was left there alone. He sent his family already east, because that's what he was told to, women, children, and just take him out. And he wasn't going to let the horses go. I mean, who would? They killed them. They killed them apparently because then, when they were moving, the army was moving, the German army, they just burned that place down. So my father, when he went to look for us, apparently never saw it.
How
Yes.
old were you when you came to the U.S. and who sponsored you?
What did he ask for? What?
She wanted to know at what age you were when you came here to the U.S. and
25.
And did anyone sponsor you?
No, we didn't need a sponsor. 25. My husband came to rescue his cousin, because they both studied chemistry at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And he was Swiss, of course, so he got his education there. And then why he went to India, because that's where I met him. A Swiss man in India, my God, that was something, different. I never knew that I would meet somebody like that. But anyway, he said that it was something that it just happened, I think, you know, that we didn't have to, because after our baby died, which I can tell, I cannot write about it, but I mean, because everybody wants a third book, and I just said, no, I can't, it's on paper, and it's there, and it just kills me. I can't do it, because my husband's reaction to it and everything, it was just too much for me. I could talk about it, I can say it, but on paper it becomes permanent then. You know, then it becomes permanent news. And when you have to elaborate it and add to it that actually what actually happened, then you don't want to even show it. So the third book is, I don't know how I'm gonna work it, so that I might write short stories maybe or something. I don't know, we'll see. My best friend who was helping me with putting both books together, Nancy Young, some of you might even know her. She used to be in real estate in Century 21, John Young in Crystal Lake. And you know, and she just died last month. I lost her, so. Yes.
Did your love of horses continue?
Oh, much. I still, yeah, listen, when we came finally, my husband and I, the second husband that I remarried then in Chicago, okay, when we finally came to Woodstock, because he had a massive coronary at age 39, very bad heart condition, and he was with Augustana, he was a doctor, and he was with Augustana Hospital in Chicago. And then he had this heart attack, and his, as he called them, his healers from Augustana Hospital, who were heart specialists and everything, said to him, you've got to go somewhere to find a little small family practice. Stay away from surgery because it's too intense for you, you cannot do it, and blah, blah, blah. You know, he was just told that he couldn't do it. So then it took him a year and a half to make up his mind to listen to those people. But then he finally said to me, look, maybe we better start thinking about it. And I said, well, I thought so from the very beginning, but you never wanted to. So now he said, well, let's try. And we, through friends and through everything, we found a place in Woodstock, Illinois. And I said, well, where is Woodstock? He says, oh, it's a cute town and everything. Next Wednesday when I'm off, they had Wednesdays off, the doctors, all the time. Here too, even after he practiced here, his Wednesday was a golf day for them, you know, so they were always off. So he says, on Wednesday, we'll take a trip up there, and you can look at it. Well, I drove up to Woodstock. This was before 47 was joined with the tollway. You know, that came later after we moved in. Then our trip to Chicago was fast. You know, I could go shopping to Chicago then much faster than I can now. You know, could now, but that's happened a few years later. That then 47 went straight into Woodstock. And that's, I don't know what year it was when they put that in, but that was a big additional thing that we really enjoyed that. So that's it. And what was the question?
Oh, that was the question was about the horses. So being in Woodstock,
yeah,
you
and
had
of course,
access to
of course,
horses.
when we moved to Woodstock, there was a house on Country Club Road that was on sale, and after living in an apartment on 2130 Lincoln Park West in Chicago, where we lived for quite a few. My husband bought it. It was one of those that you bought an apartment then somehow. It was not a condo yet. They haven't done that yet, but it was something newer than this. And my husband bought this one big apartment on this building at 2130 Lincoln Park West. We were on the 8th floor. We owned one blade of grass there in a flower pot that sometimes lived, for a while on a somewhere. So, and all of a sudden we found a house in Woodstock that had 6 acres. We didn't know what to do with it. But my husband said to me, well, you know what? You can might be able to have your own horses here. And of course, I loved them for that. And that's what I did right away. We moved on 2130 Lincoln, no, that was not it. It was 10602 Country Club Road, the house that we later on named the Dockery, on Country Club, right, going between Woodstock and Crystal Lake on Country Club Road. And we moved there, and of course then when I started planning right away. The house was very nice, very good, and we inherited a guy that was a good builder and everything, and he knew those people for 40 years who lived there before us, before the Finneys, Mr. and Mrs. Finney. Then Mr. Finney died, and Mrs. Finney never drove, so she said, I've got to move. That's it.
That's it.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
on behalf of McHenry County College and the History Department, my name is Sarah Sullivan. I'm one of the instructors here, and I am so excited that we were able to present this information to you. This is one of those nuggets of history that ends up being lost over time, and Erane's purpose in writing her books was to make sure that that information wasn't forgotten. I am so pleased that you're able to come today and share her story with her. Will stay for a few minutes if you have
Oh,
questions.
sure, I don't have any plans.
She's got no plans.
This
And
is it.
If you are interested in a book, you are more than welcome to buy one or both of them, and she will sign them for you. If you want to talk to her and not buy the book, she
No,
will still talk to you.
We'll see whether there is interest. If not,
Right, and
we'll
that's fine
see.
either way. So,
Yeah. But I just went to McHenry on March 1st, which was my big month, to McHenry, and spoke to 7 history classes there. The teacher made arrangements. We sat in an auditorium like here, and then one or two classes from teachers who were teaching history there were sent in, and I would talk to them, and then the bell would ring, and they would say 5-10 minutes for asking questions. Then they would leave. Then another class would come in.
we're not going to do that to you.
No.
We'll just have one and done. So,
Yeah.
Thank
But
you
there
very
were
much.
because when he picked me up at 7 in the morning, this teacher, I have him on a picture that was published in the paper.